Lawson here from Call Scotland, and my colleague Robert is in the background as well. So welcome today to this webinar on online resources to support literacy. Today I'd like to welcome Caroline Shepherd, who's going to share with us the ReadingWise resources, which provide a structured reading programme for learners with literacy difficulties. We're always looking for good resources to boost the confidence of learners who find reading difficult, and they're seeing that gap widen between themselves and their peers who just seem to find reading easy. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Caroline, who will present on the ReadingWise resources for about the next 20 minutes, and then we will have the opportunity to take your questions. So you would be putting your questions into the chat pane. If you go down to the bottom right of your screen to the purple chevron and opening that up, you'll see a little chat bubble. So you can type in questions as we go along, but we will be taking them all at the end, and we'll be able to have the chance to ask Caroline specific questions on things she's covered or just general questions about the resources. So Caroline, are you ready to get started?
I'm ready. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely fine. So I'm switching off my mic just now, but on you go. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you for the introduction there, Shirley. So thanks very much for joining us today, and thank you also to Shirley and Call Scotland for inviting us along to talk a little bit about ReadingWise. We're delighted to be here. We've worked with many schools across Scotland over the last 7 or 8 years, and it's been a real joy to do that, as well as across schools across the UK. What I wanted to show you first, though, is really what is ReadingWise like for pupils, because I think for pupils and learners, because this is obviously the key thing. Some images here describe a little bit about what it is like, small groups using technology, working on their own lesson plans at their own pace. But hopefully the technology, I can't even find my cursor now, so sorry.
Sorry, Caroline, are you able to share your screen?
Ah, sorry, it looks to me like it's being shared. Thank you. Let me just try that again. There we are. We thought we were doing the right thing. Let me try again. Share screen. Share application. Share screen. Hopefully that has now come there. Is that working okay now?
It's not yet, no. Something come out? Yeah, that's it now. Thanks.
Yes, come up. Okay, so apologies. So here we are. I'll start again. So here's the introduction. So delighted to be working here with Call Scotland today. So what's ReadingWise like as a learner? So I think these images just give you an indication. Pupils working at their own pace, through their own resources, through their own activities which have been allocated to them. And what I'm hoping to do here is log in as a pupil, just so that you can get a feel for what that interface is like for a learner. So pupils or teachers would log in using this login page. And usually we've identified where the pupil's difficulties lie through assessment and so on. And then we allocate the specific resources to the pupil, which is relevant. I've allocated to this pupil, this pretend pupil, a range of different things. If a learner is working at or needing support with phonics, and at that level, it's the zip program that would be allocated. They'd click into that, and the lessons just load for them exactly as you expect. The phonics work is a sort of phoneme grapheme correspondences, so they listen.
Fit. Well done.
And select. Very simple to access.
Peg.
Well done.
And so on.
Bet.
Well done.
There's a couple of different types of activity.
Okay.
And so on. Now, what you can see with the pupil interface here is that we've got a cursive font as default, but you can allocate a dyslexia font called Open Dyslexia. We want to make the interface for the pupil as accessible and as possible, removing as many barriers as possible. Pupils can have an overview of where they're working and how they're working, which is similar to how the teacher can see that as well. What you can build in quite nicely to online resources is things like rewards, avatars, things which allow the pupil to bespoke their learning environment, even though they don't get choices over the content they're covering, because we want to provide that for them. So that's the early stages reading program. At a slightly higher, usually from P4 above, there is a decoding program, and this pupil is at this particular part of this activity.
Clock.
They listen and
Try again. Well done.
and so on. The program tells them if they're right and wrong. I'll just show you one other element of it, which is around vocabulary. Teachers can allocate different things according to the needs of the pupil, but here this is quite a new program that we launched only last year, and within this, pupils listen if they wish to listen.
Eagerly.
And then they decide, is this the right description of the word? Built into this is some scaffolding, so some support with images, with synonyms, antonyms, sentences, and so on. And over time, as the words get presented back to the pupils, we remove some of the support. So the pupils are eventually working just with definitions. So that just gives you an idea of the user interface. When the pupils log out, they can see various information, but the program obviously remembers where they're at. So I'll just go back to the PowerPoint now. So that's to just give you a sense of what it's like for a pupil. The way that we've built our resources is based on or based around something called the simple view of reading, which you may be familiar with. It looks at reading on one level around word level and decoding, and on another around reading comprehension. The way that we tackle those things as emerging readers is slightly different, and so that's the way that we've decided to divide our resources up. So within the decoding or the word level work, we've got phonics, we've got word building, decoding and fluency, and then the vocabulary. Vocabulary obviously bridges over to the comprehension, but we've got a slightly different structured resource which deals with comprehension. So there are different resources which are aiming to tackle different difficulties that pupils might be having with their reading. There's obviously a range of information within the website for teachers, for monitoring and evaluating how pupils are getting on too. In terms of logistics, so in schools, what we tend to find is that somebody will take the strategic overview. It might be in the support for learning departments, it might be in English departments, it depends which schools we're working with, but they'll have the overall lead for how ReadingWise is being implemented and used. And then others may have access as supervisors and so on for monitoring and setting up pupils. Usually where ReadingWise is used for intervention, it's in groups of up to 10 pupils. And so what you can do quite nicely with technology, as you know, is pupils can be working on the programs that's going to support their difficulties, but supported within a group. So a supervisor knows exactly how the program's being used, what they're trying to get out of it, and will have had training to support the pupils, even though pupils are working on their own bespoke lesson plans. Depending on the resources pupils are using, there are slightly different timings. All of our research has led us to sort of suggest timings which lead to best outcomes. And so, obviously you have to take into account implementation within a timetable and other constraints like that. But broadly, with the word level work, the zip, the decoding and the vocab, 10 to 20-minute sessions daily or as close to that as possible seems to work most effectively. With the comprehension and the way that's run, we have longer sessions, usually twice a week, working around a particular book or a particular story. In terms of equipment, it's usable across a wide range of different hardwares. Headphones help when you're listening to the sounds, and there's a few other little bits of equipment which are useful. Usually schools will do benchmark for reading at the beginning of a school year. This tends to flag up the pupils who might benefit from using ReadingWise, and then when they've completed lesson plans, we suggest benchmarking again. We've got questionnaires built into the program to gather qualitative feedback, and the two information, the qualitative and quantitative, give rise to information as to what might be the useful next stages once pupils have finished a program of work. We talk about environment and culture, particularly within our training, and this comes from some research we did with the department, the education department at the University of Cambridge. They did something called an illuminative study with us, and it really looked apart from looking at how effective the resources were, it looked at the conditions which affect outcomes. So things like the environment and how conducive that is to the learning of the individuals, plus the culture within a group, which I think with online learning is particularly interesting, because actually the pupils, although they're working on their own lesson plans, where a supervisor creates a culture of understanding about what they're all trying to achieve, where they're moving towards, and might dip in occasionally with some focus on specific strategies that are being embedded over and above the individual activities pupils are doing, we found that that's really helpful. So with our training with staff, we build all of that. We build those suggestions and ideas in. So I was just going to show you a few slides about the modules, the individual modules and what they're trying to do. So the ZIP is online program for pupils working around phonics and words. It systematically presents content to the pupils, and it aims to do that in an adaptive way. So the idea is the pupil focuses more on the things they're unfamiliar with rather than the things they're familiar with and that they're confident in already. It's used within schools. It tends to be used either as targeted intervention for those who've got gaps in their phonic knowledge. So that can be with older pupils who've missed out some school. It can be with pupils new to English. Within mainstream, it is being used by some schools in P2 alongside sort of literacy being, you know, the phonics being worked on and learned. Sessions, as I showed you earlier, for the pupils look a little bit like this. So a word or letter or digraph to two sounds or vice versa. The default is a cursive font, but you can allocate a dyslexia font. You've got lots of information for monitoring within your teacher dashboard. So you can monitor how pupils are getting on. You can see their accuracy levels. You can see how far they are through their program, how close to 5-minute sessions daily they're managing to access it. If you have any causes for concern, you can dip in more deeply and find out more formative information. With the decoding module, it's, as I said before, usually running groups of up to 10, pupils working at their own lesson plan at their own pace. It's lots and lots of these little bite-sized online lessons, and pupils work on a lesson plan which is determined for them based on a reading age assessment at the beginning. The program is self-paced, the pupils work through it and they're rewarded as they work through it. And then with certainly all the evidence we've got, and we've worked with various bodies on gathering evidence around the programme, and we get feedback from schools very regularly, and everything suggests it works effectively, and we question why that is. And I think some of the reasons are that we present things in different ways. A range of techniques are used to present things to pupils. We aim to make the user interface as simple as it possibly can be without losing functionality. So it's very simple for the pupils to access. We also aim to start pupils within their zone of proximal development. So they should be feeling really good success. If they've already fallen behind their peers, as Shirley alluded to previously, if they're falling behind and their confidence is knocked and their independence for learning is sometimes knocked, we want to make it achievable independently. And what we found is that pupil esteem, independence in learning, and all of those things are built up, which is really obviously an excellent outcome. In terms of the internal locus of control, I think that's something you can do quite nicely with online independent learning, in the sense that pupils can feel ownership over those successes. So all of these things seem to work and lead to reasonable levels, high levels of engagement. Lessons for the pupils within the decoding are variable. I showed you one as a learner earlier. We present content to pupils. We have between 5 and 7 items presented at any one time, because that's optimal for short-term working memory. When pupils have to get everything correct to move to the next lesson, but you can see the lessons are quite short. They get moments of lift through little GIFs, which they can make choices around and like and dislike. So very short the lessons are punctuated by little moments of lift and validation. Another element of the programme is around non-decodable and hard to contextualise words, and the focus there is around strategies for memory, and so there's a focus of that. Coming together, we try to bring things together in sentence work where we think about fluency, we think about inference, and also more individual vocabulary. We found that for pupils to understand exactly where they are in their learning journey is a really important part of the process. They don't think it's going on forever. They've got a sense of where the beginning and the journey and the end is. And so at the end of a chapter of work within the decoding, they get a little pop-up certificate, which gives the clear presentation of that. Again, there's monitoring for the decoding so that teachers can see where pupils are at, and flagging any causes for concern that might need dipping into. With the vocabulary, it's got I'd say broader use than just targeted intervention, so it can be used across whole classes as well as for targeted work. We've debated the use of just a focus on tier 2 language or tier 2 vocabulary, which is an expression you might be familiar with. We've recognised working on that, all the research points to working on that being really important in vocabulary development, but also that where pupils are working on vocabulary which is relating to the context of what they're working on in the classroom, whether it's a book that's being read, whether it's a particular topic, is the best vocabulary to be working on. So that's been built into how pupils work on the programme. We aim to present the vocabulary over time, so it's presented to the pupils multiple times, and it's also built into a sort of revision cycle to help overcome the loss, the loss or the interrupting the forgetting curve. And so the technology can do that quite effectively. And then, as I showed you from the learner account, pupils work with a range of different sort of information about particular words, and that scaffolding decreases as time goes on. Where we allocate a list, there's a short quiz for pupils to do so that you can gather raw data. It doesn't have to be allocated, but some people find that helpful. And then, as I showed you, pupils work with this sort of information. We gather lots of information, and this is joy that you of online learning, that you can record some interesting information to respond to and use formatively. The last thing I'll just mention is around the comprehension. So with the comprehension is more nuanced. It obviously is. There is a greater involvement in staff who work using the comprehension programme, and that's because the sessions, we aim to use narrative story. We actively and explicitly teach we gather comprehension strategies into 4 areas and explicitly teach how to use those strategies in unpicking the text. There's a journey built into the story so that pupils are developing these skills strategies alongside getting involved in the story. So reading for pleasure is built into the process. Every session is a combination of independent online work that the pupils access the text independently. They use the strategies through a little toolkit of activities, but then we aim for them to come together and discuss as a group what they've been working on. And for the comprehension, really that is the most meaningful way we believe to work on it. Again, it's in groups of up to 10, and everything is recorded so pupils can listen to the text rather than read independently. They can click on words to have it read to them, and so on. So there's a lot of support mechanisms within the comprehension work. The groups of strategies are broken down into 3 activities each, and each of those activities model one or a number of specific comprehension strategies. So that's me. I think that's my sort of 20 minutes. So we do work with a number of schools across Scotland. We work with whole local authorities. Many schools will do, or groups of schools do free trials with us to understand if ReadingWise would support your reading needs. If you want any more information from us or want to be introduced to schools near you using ReadingWise, then you can please do make contact with me. So Shirley, shall I hand over to you to?
Yes, no, that's
Manage
great.
the
That's
questions.
great. If you just keep that final screen up, Caroline, and then people have got your contact details there. One of the questions that did come in from Liz was, is there a way to trial the resource with pupils? So that's it, just on there, yes.
Yeah, generally what we aim to do, I mean, what we always run a free trial. Even if somebody comes to us and says, you know, we want to use the resources, we encourage running a free trial, because the technology is one side, although I'd say increasingly pupils, the schools seem to have less problems with technology and access. But it's, can you timetable it? Can we get the staff trained up to make best use of it? Can you fit it within your within your timetabling and so on? So all of those things we think are worthwhile doing. So usually what we would do is a demonstration similar to the sort of thing I've just shown you. Then schools will decide if they would like to do a trial, identify the groups they want to trial it with, and it runs. We do training before the trial so that you know exactly how to make best use of the resources, and then that trial usually runs for 2 or 3 weeks, really to enable you to see if it's a resource that suits your needs.
Great. Sounds like Liz will be in touch because she's already interested in running a trial, so that's great. One of the other things was, the questions were, does the programme allocate pupils, or is that up to the teacher to decide?
So what we do not have built in is a sort of is an assessment which places people on a specific resource. We tend to work with schools to try and understand where. So usually schools would do some kind of assessment at the beginning, and we decide if it's decoding or comprehension or both that are needed, and from that we allocate the resources. With the decoding, usually schools will do some kind of single word reading test or something which indicates deficiencies in decoding. We put that detail into the site and it allocates the resources. The phonics is a bit more, the zip work phonics is a bit more teacher judgment as to where the needs are.
If anyone else has got any questions, please do write them into the chat box there. I really liked the pupil interface, Caroline. It was nice and clear with no clutter and distractions, and obviously really great to have the text-to-speech icon there just so that people are able to listen to the words there. So when you're saying for best effect 10 to 20 minute sessions daily, is that something that can be done at home as part of that? Can pupils log in once they've got the login details, they can be doing it at school for some of the time and at home for some of the time?
Yes, that's exactly right. So obviously during lockdown there was a lot more of that being pupils accessing at home. So yes, it's username and password. You just go in through the web browser at home, and then it's very straightforward. I think sometimes the difficulty schools find, particularly with where are gaps in reading, is that sometimes it'll be the pupils less likely to access it at home or less supported in accessing these things at home. So so there's debates over how that's, whether schools choose to use it at home or not, but yes, you can do so.
Right. What phonics progression does it follow is a question that's being asked.
So the phonics progression we chose to follow was letters and sounds. We can build in other phonics progressions if that's preferred, but so we follow SATPIN and the 44 phonemes through the order that letters and sounds presents it.
Okay, thank you. And although we've talked about the free trial, can you give a cost estimate?
It's very variable based on, so we work with schools which have 20 or 30 pupils. We work with schools that have 2,000 pupils. What we tend to do is work with the school to find out pricing which is going to suit the needs of the whole school, so that there's no restrictions according to numbers of pupils. You know, it's not per pupil based. So on average, I think if you look at the website, on average for all the resources, it's I think something like £1,800 a year, but that is very different for a very small school compared to a very big school. And what I say to people is, you know, obviously budgets for individual schools are very variable. So we're very happy to have discussions with schools to find things which suit their needs.
Great, thank you very much for that. I was wondering about the lessons. Is it a linear progression in the lessons, or can you go back to do something you've already covered just to reinforce earlier learning?
So with the zip and with the vocab, it's based on accuracy. So things are brought back to pupils where accuracy is lower. So that's how those two programs work. With the decoding program, which was the first program we built, it is linear, and it was quite a deliberate decision to form it in that way, because what we found, because we could have built in to keep bringing pupils back to certain sections, but we found the progress and moving forward, the psychology around that was a really important step. So what tends to happen is pupils work through a linear program at a point where they should be, as I said before, feeling, you know, high levels of success. They work through to the end of the program, although you can finish it earlier if you think that would be better for the individual. And then based on assessment at the end and based on discussion, pupils can come back. There was a case of a pupil early on when we piloted the decoding who, it was from an inner city school in London. It was somebody in a secondary school, and they'd made a couple of years progress in their reading decoding. And they were interviewed. It was part of the sort of randomised control trial at the early stages. And this lad who wasn't particularly engaged in the process came back and he said, well, yeah, you know, I'm not sure I really liked it, but, you know, I think I could probably do better if I did it again. And so some schools will bring pupils back onto a programme at a different stage based on their progress, but they can be brought back to repeat things.
Good. No, thank you for that. Nancy is asking, can you alter the pace of delivery when listening to the text?
No, I don't think you can. I'm just trying to think if there is a technical way of being able to do that. Are you? Yes, I was trying to think of the things that I illustrated to you. I'd have to look at that, Nancy, but no, I'm not aware that we can do that.
Right, you were saying you could personalize some of the settings, but whether the speed of the voice is one of them, we can
yes, no, I'll jot that down and I'll find that out. Yeah,
feed that back to everyone.
Yeah.
Just a quick question on is there flexibility with the length of the free trial, as 2 weeks would be too short a time?
There is flexibility, because to be honest, what we're trying to do is understand to what extent it suits your needs, and so we have no, you know, so yeah, there is flexibility for sure.
Great, good. And was the accent a Scottish one on the voice? I certainly didn't pick it up as a Scottish accent there.
Yes, no, it certainly is. So what we've done is, so there are two. We got everything recorded for the schools in Scotland with 2 people did the recording for us, both of whom are Scottish, and yeah, so it is got recordings for Scotland. We're in the process of doing that for schools in Wales. I was talking to a school in Ireland this morning, and they've decided to use the Scottish voices because that suits their needs better. So yes, we have done those recordings using voice artists from Scotland.
Great, well, that's good. Thank you so much for answering all these questions there. And so thank you for everyone for attending today, and please take Caroline's contact details, and she'll be delighted if people are get in touch and find out some more information on the website as well. So thank you, Caroline, very much for coming along to present today, and thanks to Robert for the technical support and doing the recording, and everyone will be sent a copy of this recording, and the archived webinar will appear on our website in a couple of days. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening.
And thanks for